Within the past week, we have received the heartbreaking news that Grand National at Blackpool Pleasure Beach could well be on the chopping block. Welcome back to ThrillNet, and a video I hoped I'd never have to make, as today we are going to be discussing the very real possibility that Blackpool Pleasure Beach could be set to remove Grand National to make way for future developments. As things stand, Grand National is currently Grade 2 listed and therefore legally protected from demolition. However, it has recently come to light that the park have applied to revoke this so that they can completely demolish the ride. But with the ride currently undergoing a major refurbishment to commemorate its 90th anniversary and claimed by the park to be set to reopen later this season, many enthusiasts remain sceptical that this news could all be a load of rubbish, or as Amanda Thompson would call it, a ridiculous rumour. So to hopefully clear things up a little, I thought why not make a video discussing everything we know regarding the ride's current state and sharing my thoughts on whether or not I think it will be demolished in the near future. Grand National opened in August 1935 and was built by Charles Page. It is one of only 2 Mobius looping wooden roller coasters left operating in the world, of which there are a further 3 steel coasters of a similar nature. The term Mobius loop stems from the ride's unique layout in that it consists of 2 twin tracks configured into a single loop on which trains race each other side by side. This is possible because the tracks separate out from one another and switch sides at the start of the circuit, resulting in guests disembarking the ride on the opposite side of the station to which they boarded, having only traversed half of the ride's total track length. So what has actually gone down to suggest that this incredible and unique wooden roller coaster could be set for demolition? Well, the news was actually broken by a charity known as the C20 Society, which is dedicated to preserving British heritage. Now, essentially, it recently came to light that on their website, Grand National is listed as at risk of demolition, and they published an article essentially stating that while the ride was Grade 2 listed as recently as 2017, obviously protecting it from demolition, the owners of the Pleasure Beach are planning to apply for listed building consent to completely demolish the ride, as they're obviously changing their direction a little. Historically, Pleasure Beach have obviously always been very proud of their heritage and have prioritised preserving that. However, they're now starting to change their direction a little bit to better compete with theme parks in the UK and worldwide in what is currently a very challenging financial climate. And in doing so, we're starting to see more rides and attractions being removed from the park to make way for future developments. So what would my thoughts be if Grand National was to be demolished? Honestly, I would be absolutely devastated. I understand that the park needs to continue to evolve and that times are challenging at the moment financially and they need to keep those visitors flooding through the gates. However, I don't think Grand National is a ride that should be touched because in my eyes, it is the best classic ride that they have. And the reason for that is because it is the only one of their 4 wooden roller coasters that I would personally class as a thrill coaster. And for that reason, in my eyes, it is a vital part of the park's coaster lineup. It gives some absolutely incredible airtime. It pulls some really good laterals around the unbanked turns that it has. And it's just such a fun and raucous ride. If the park are going to demolish one of their wooden roller coasters to make way for a future development, I'd much rather see Nickelodeon Streak demolished, as I feel that is much more obsolete in the park's lineup due to it offering a very similar experience to Big Dipper, which is also Grade 2 listed, and that I also wouldn't want to see demolished because it is the most historic wooden coaster on park. It is the oldest of the lot, and Blue Flyer is also a very vital part of the lineup as well, with it being the only junior coaster on park. Even some of the more modern steel family coasters on park, such as Avalanche and Steeplechase, are better candidates for demolition than Grand National, as in my eyes, they're not as vital a part of the lineup. And they're also very unreliable rides as well that have had a lot of issues in recent years and that the park keep having to spend money to repair time and time again. But let's be real here for a second. Do I actually think the park will demolish Grand National? Let's discuss some of the reasons for and against that. Now, let's face it, the website where this news has stemmed from is a reputable source. It's a charity dedicated to preserving British heritage. Therefore, I have quite a strong belief that the park are planning to apply for listed building consent to demolish Grand National. They must at least be contemplating it, surely. I don't think this charity would put it on the website as being at risk of demolition if there wasn't some sort of risk, especially due to the fact that Grand National is without a doubt a very expensive ride to maintain. It's obviously an old classic wooden coaster for starters, but also you've got 2 chain lifts because it has the twin tracks. You've also got 2 brake runs, and that's a lot more than your typical coaster that would only have one of those. So you've got double the hardware to maintain, essentially. And it's no secret that Blackpool Pleasure Beach isn't in the best financial state at the moment. They made an almost £3 million loss last year, which is devastating, but they're still having to invest in new attractions such as the gyro swing coming next year so they can continue to compete. And beyond that, the ride has aged quite poorly in recent years. It had about a 2-week closure in October last year, allegedly because one of the chains snapped, so that had to be repaired. Obviously, if you're having 2 chains, there's double the chance of that happening, as I briefly alluded to. And there's also the fact that its trains put quite a bit of stress on the ride structure. It had a bit of retracking done a couple of years ago, but the current trains it has are incredibly heavy. It hasn't always had those trains. The previous trains it had, unfortunately, got damaged beyond use in a fire that took place during 2004. But those old trains were much lighter because they only had 2 rows per car instead of 3, which the current trains have. And the coasters just struggled more so ever since then with these new trains. I know other coasters on parks such as Big Dipper and Nickelodeon Streak have even heavier trains because they have 4 rows per car. However, with the Grand National obviously running 2 trains side by side, you're obviously getting double the stress there that you'd usually get on a wooden coaster. So ideally, the trains need to be as light as possible to mitigate that. I also feel that the ridership of Grand National has declined in recent years, and I'm not referring to the fact here that it only ran 2 trains last year due to presumably some block section issues, which again is another cost the park have to deal with, but I believe that they are dealing with as part of the refurbishment that they're doing on it at the moment. What I'm referring to here is that recently the height restriction on it had to be upped to 1.4 metres. It actually has the highest height restriction of any coaster on park, and that just means that less people are able to ride it. So maybe Blackpool want to demolish it so that they can install a ride that can have a lower height restriction, so that there's something that more people can do on park in its place. So yes, on one hand it is looking a bit doom and gloom for you Grand National lovers, but don't worry, as there are plenty of reasons to contradict all of that, why I believe the Grand National will remain at the park. The obvious reason is the refurbishment I just mentioned. Why would the park go to all the effort to refurbish the ride when they're already struggling financially to then close it? That would just be a complete waste of money. Okay, they did that in the case of the Grand Prix for the final lap event so that they could run it for one night at an event that people paid at the extortionate price of £50 to attend. However, the park were very explicit in what they were doing there, equally so with the Grand National, and there's nothing to suggest in their statement regarding their refurbishment of the Grand National and the refurbishment of numerous other rides and attractions on park, which I have done a video about that statement by the way, so check it out if you haven't already. But they've explicitly stated that the Grand National is undergoing a refurbishment to commemorate its 90th anniversary and will be reopening later this season. You've also got the retrack that took place a few years ago that I mentioned before. Again, why would they do that if they had plans to demolish the ride? And there's also the rumour as well that Grand National has really poor foundations. Obviously the area on which a lot of the Pleasure Beach is built on used to be a beach, and the Grand National area is notorious for being very unsturdy. Is that even a word? No, I'm no engineer, but there is a real possibility that the ground on which Grand National is built on just wouldn't be able to house a modern coaster. The foundations wouldn't be able to accommodate the footers, etc, etc. So do I think the Grand National is set for demolition? Probably not, but it may well be a possibility in the future. As I said, this news has come from a reputable source. Therefore, I do believe that the park may well be considering to apply for listed building consent to demolish it. However, I don't believe a definitive decision has been made because if it had, then why would they be carrying out this massive refurbishment for its 90th anniversary and claiming that it's going to be reopening later this season? It's probably just a consideration that's on the back burner. They may well just keep a closer eye on ridership, the cost to run, etc. over the next few years, and then make a decision perhaps once the new attraction, which as I said is heavily rumoured to be a coaster, opens on the Grand Prix site. And who knows after that, if the Nash is just costing too much to run and it's not all that popular compared to some of the other major thrill coasters on park, they may well choose to demolish it to make way for the park's next coaster after that, whatever that may be. In terms of what I'd like to see regarding the future of Grand National, I think it's definitely going to need a full retrack at some point, which could either be done in-house or by a company that's experienced in that department, such as GCI or Gravity Group. If you do choose to go with Gravity Group though, Pleasure Beach, please don't put the Timberliner trains on Nash because they are absolutely awful. Tonnerre to Zeus is the most uncomfortable coaster I have ever ridden in my life. Instead, what I'd like to see is Megaphobia's trains put on Grand National. Now, Megaphobia is obviously a wooden roller coaster that operated at Oakwood Theme Park in Wales, and with Oakwood Theme Park presumably having closed for good, then Megaphobia is probably also presumably closed for good as well. But Megaphobia has very similar trains to Grand National. Both trains are manufactured by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters, or PTC for short. But the difference with Megaphobia is that it only has 2 rows per car, therefore its trains are lighter than those used on Grand National. Therefore, if Grand National was to get Megaphobia's trains, this would eliminate quite a bit of the stress that is being put on the ride structure and therefore further prolong the ride's lifespan and reduce costs going into the future regarding the amount of maintenance that needs to be conducted on it. Grand National does run 4 trains though, and Megaphobia only runs 2, so the park would also need to purchase a couple of extra PTC trains of the same type as Megaphobia, just so that they can keep the ride operating on 4 trains as it should be. Regardless of whether Grand National is or isn't going to get demolished though, please guys, just make sure you ride it as much as possible when you visit Pleasure Beach, because at the end of the day, anything can happen. I was just talking about Oakwood Theme Park there. Did we think that was going to close last season? Okay, it wasn't doing very well, but they filed last year that they were experiencing growth concern and that they were fit to continue to operate. Who knows when we could see the end of Grand National. And as for you, Pleasure Beach, please don't demolish Grand National, obviously, but what I do ask of you, regardless of what you're going to do, is please be transparent with people, as you have been doing over the course of this year. So far, you've been smashing it, so please continue to do that. But Grand National's refurbishment isn't the only thing that's going on at Pleasure Beach at the moment. The place is an absolute hive of activity, which is why I want to go and check out this video on the right side of your screen, where I dissect everything that Pleasure Beach have announced is going to be taking place for 2025. And for more things theme park related in the UK and beyond, make sure you click the icon in the centre of your screen to subscribe.